It's the economy, stupid! That famous James Carville line is pretty much held as a fundamental truth in American politics. So with 2017 going into the record books as one of the better years economically in a really long time, President Trump should be very, very popular. Yeah? Well, not so much. What has happened to disconnect the health of the economy from the popularity of the occupant of the White House? We're digging into numbers from all year long to explain why Trump's polling seems to defy gravity in reverse. And what would the last poll of this year be without some New Year's resolutions? Well, we've got America's most popular ones, and we will share ours with you as well. So, let's get started. And hi, everybody. Welcome to the last episode of Poll Hub for 2017. I'm J.D. Dapper, Director of Innovation here at the Marist Poll.
I'm Barbara Carvalho, Director of the Marist Poll.
And I'm Lee Marigoff, Director of the Marist College Institute for Public Opinion.
There is an axiom in politics, we talked about it in the open, it's pocketbook, it's the economy, stupid, whatever, that as goes the economy, so does the popularity of the party in power, or really kind of more specifically, so does the popularity of the occupant of the White House, the President of the United States. That is not happening with Donald Trump. Why?
I jump in and just say that, some of it is to do, I think this time with, people are, the economy's had a decent year. And so people are turning to lots of other things. And in fact, when Gallup recently asked what people's number one concern was, 85% mentioned non-economic matters. So I think that's one place to jump off on this discussion.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that there's a real disconnect between what people see as what's happening in their lives and what's happening in Washington. And perhaps that's part of why we see such low ratings of everybody in D.C. I mean,
nobody's getting credit for
this.
The
president isn't alone, and certainly he has a stellar approval rating compared to the Republicans and Democrats in Congress. So
that's a very low bar.
Yes, the bar's low.
Yeah.
But, I also might add, I think one of the things that we've seen that's occurred in D.C., and particularly with the Trump administration, is a number of the policies that they have put forth throughout the year actually aren't terribly popular. So I'm thinking back, and I'm sure you guys can think back a few also, but we started, with the travel ban. And, a majority of Americans, 53% in an early CBS News poll, were opposed to that. But there's a whole list of issues. I think the Washington Post actually put together a kind of a year-end summary of some of these things. But we saw the proposal to end DACA. We saw and are in the midst of, a tax plan that nobody is particularly sure of what that's going to mean.
Ending Obamacare, which turned into a bit of a disaster for them.
Exactly. The Paris Climate Agreement. And even a lot of the climate regulations. So it's not that people are just evaluating this administration, I think, on the one economic barometer, but there has been a really dissonance, particularly among Democrats and independents, with
when
policy
Barbara was going
proposals.
through that list, I was struck by the fact that I almost had a time warp and was thinking, gosh, those are a lot of the same things that were discussed during the campaign for president. And those are still on the table, and the degree to which Trump has acted on some of those things, not shockingly, given the issue focus on the campaign, or issue direction of the campaign, are unpopular.
Yeah, so let's stipulate that we're going to talk about a bunch of different polls here. We'll drop some names and numbers and all that, and they're not all polls are created equal. We've talked about this all year long on this podcast. In fact, that's one of the reasons we exist, is to talk about the fact that a poll is not a poll is not a poll, and so we're going to talk about some, and we'll call out any that are, extremely outside the norm. But not all of these are done with the same methodology.
Right.
But what we want to talk about is really kind of the trends.
Yeah, and I think what is interesting is exactly your point, Jay, that they are all showing a similar trend, regardless of whether we're looking at probability or non-probability methodologies, online, telephone, IVR. We are seeing really a negativity, a very positive impression by most Americans of the economy, but then a negative impression about how the country is
So
actually doing.
that Survey Monkey poll, which was done with the Washington Post that we're talking about, has some really interesting things in it that are kind of not the types of questions that we heard all year long about specific policies. One that struck out is when asked about 2017, Americans were 4 times as likely to use a negative word than a positive word. That's kind of open-ended, right? That's one of those open-ended questions.
Exactly, absolutely.
Is there a better way to capture the mood of a nation than that?
Well, it's funny. We used a similar question during the 2016 campaign, and we actually got the same response, or a very similar response from Americans. What did they say? Chaotic, crazy, were some of the top words that people used to describe the campaign, as they are also using to describe the country right now.
I hope they weren't describing our poll that way.
You didn't ask him that question.
No.
You don't want to ask that. This same survey asked a good year, bad year. Is it a good year or a bad year for? And listed a bunch of different things. And President Trump, bad year. 60% a bad year for President Trump. 61% bad year for the quality of news coverage. But two things that really stood out at the very end of this to me is one, 82% a bad year for race relations. Very striking to me after 8 years of the first African-American president, and now 9 years from the time that Obama won, when there was a lot of discussion about how America's finally post-racial.
Yeah.
Well,
You're
no.
the only person to mention that since Donald Trump was elected.
Right. And then 81% said it's a bad year for the U.S. political system. Politics has become the dirtiest word, the biggest cesspool for most people, the way most people think about it.
Yeah, so people are not feeling, at least, that the swamp has been drained. That has not occurred, and I think to some degree, as people, even with the tax bill, as we've talked about previously, there's a sense of things have not gone decidedly in the direction that people may have hoped for. So again, sometimes we get wave elections. We've been getting a lot of them, and that's maybe the dissatisfaction comes through periodically. But Barb, I think you want to talk about some of the specifics.
But also, I think what's interesting is when people talk about the Trump administration, it's very polarized. When people talk about Washington, people are really disconnected. And one of the numbers that jumped out for me in this poll was that actually 68% of people said that they themselves had a good year. So I don't think there's anything that more clearly states the difference between what people feel is going on in their own lives. 68% think it's pretty good, and then the numbers on how they think the country is doing, which is 64% in the wrong direction.
Yeah, that's stunning.
Or a bad year for the United States overall, which is almost 60%.
Right. So I'm good. My family's good. Things are good. Boy, everything else is bad. The country's bad. Politics is bad. Race relations is bad. I mean, that's just...
So we know why Congress is not having a good year, and we know why people think Donald Trump didn't have a particularly good year also. And I'd say one additional point on Donald Trump. During the campaign last year, in 2016, there was a sense of, what would Donald Trump be? What is he like in terms of his qualities? And there wasn't a lot of discussion about what he would do as president because most people didn't think he was necessarily going to be elected president.
Or they didn't pay it. There was no coverage of issues anyway.
Yeah.
There was no coverage. There was no media coverage of issues of Donald Trump. It was the sideshow.
But a sense of what Hillary Clinton might be as president, not about her character as much because we sort of knew her in a political arena. So now Donald Trump, the question of unfit for office, the character, the tweeting, and all that stuff. Well, those numbers have skyrocketed during this year. And people, during the campaign, those were the serious questions people had them. Those have not been resolved. So getting away from the economy, yes. But talking about Donald Trump in terms of his qualities to be president, I think he's got an enormous amount of convincing still to do coming up before the midterm elections in 2018.
And also, one thing I would like to add is these feelings are very polarized and very partisan. So if you are a Democrat and most independents this is why these numbers are so large.
Republicans don't feel this way.
But Republicans in general do not feel this way. In fact, one of the things that we saw during this year was when we looked at the question on whether the country is moving in the right or the wrong direction. In the Obama years, the numbers were very similar, with most people thinking it was moving in the wrong direction. But that was made up of Republicans and independents during that time. And now we're seeing the opposite. Democrats and independents. Independents are continuing to see that the country's going in the wrong direction, but now it's Democrats instead of Republicans.
So this raises something completely kind of off topic, but something that I'm interested by. The parties have become all of us have become increasingly partisan for a whole host of reasons. We've talked about gerrymandering, we've talked about money, we've talked about all this. You got to win the base, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what you just said was that the independents during Obama kind of sided with Republicans. The independents right now are kind of siding with Democrats. Mm-hmm. Hello, middle of the road.
Exactly.
Is there any space in American politics that is so degraded, that is so looked down upon, that is so disliked by the American people? Is there any room in the American political system for somebody to recognize that the only way to win and to govern successfully is to try and actually appeal to the people in the middle?
Well, that still remains to be seen as to whether someone who at this point wants to be a consensus player, a consensus leader, can appeal to a majority of people.
But the numbers seem to suggest that's where you can succeed.
Well, but
if the polls are right.
But
and
up
I
until
believe
this
the
point,
polls are right.
up until this point, for the last several decades, campaigns have focused on their base. And that campaign strategy has now also transferred into governing. And that's really what we've seen over the last couple of decades.
So here's a guy that won the presidency by not running. He ran against the party. He blew up the Republican Party. If he was a guy who instead wanted to blow up the Democratic Party, say, just as this example, but wanted to then run as a centrist. So he blows up the Democratic Party, or a woman, whatever.
Or the Republican Party.
Isn't there a space for a presidential candidate or even Senate candidates?
Well, if you're looking to get an upset, I mean, look at the Jones race in Alabama. I mean, clearly he had to get independents, he had to get some Republicans along the way.
And he had to have a nutcase.
Yeah, it worked out. It worked out. But all things had to work his way in order to win as a Democrat in Alabama. But he was also trying not only to get the base of the Democrats revved up, but he's also trying to reach out a little bit. We haven't getting a lot of reach out. Like, look, the tax bill. I mean, no Democrats are voting for it.
And some Republicans from high-tech states like New York voted against it.
Yeah.
And I think 2016 had exactly that. They had a Republican in Donald Trump that people did not think was part of the Republican Party, and they had a Democrat in Bernie Sanders, who clearly wasn't part of the Democratic Party because he is an independent.
Hi, I'm Mary Griffith, executive producer of Poll Hub. If you're enjoying this week's episode, and we really hope you are, check out our previous episodes and let us know what you think. Email your questions and feedback to pollhub, all one word, @marist.edu. You can also catch us on social media. Just search @MarisPoll on Twitter and MarisPoll on Facebook and Instagram. And of course, stay up to date with our new episodes by subscribing. That is wherever you get your podcasts. There's lots more Poll Hub still to come. Stay with us.
So now we come to whatever and fake news, and no offense, but literally,
I hate these. What are you doing?
You know what I mean. So what we do each year at the Marist Poll is we talk among ourselves, we talk among students, we look to social media and web comments, and we put together a list of words or phrases that people find most annoying. And we came up with quite an interesting list this year. Anybody want to jump in and say what their favorite was?
You almost didn't have to look at the results. I mean, for the 9th consecutive year, whatever has been the most annoying word or phrase.
You should say that the way people say it, Lee.
Whatever.
Yeah, okay. That's better.
I have my own, the phrase that irks me the most the only poll that counts is the one on election day.
I think that's a pretty
That's an
narrow,
insider one, but I like it.
Self-serving.
No, but
that
it's
is
good.
pretty narrow group of
The
people.
one I dislike is down on the list. It's actually 5th on the list, and it's you know what I mean. And it drives me crazy when people they say something like, "Well, the sky is blue." You know what I mean? And then I was taking this ride and I saw this deer, and you know what I mean? Yes, I know what you mean. Just tell me. It drives me crazy.
Well, we did get a lot of interest in the fact that we included fake news this time, because I think it's really seen as a word or phrase that is considered to be more political and doesn't necessarily fit in with the rest of them. But I think what's interesting is fake news seems to actually becoming more part of our lexicon.
It was the number 2 choice.
It was the number 2 choice, exactly. 23% of Americans found that to be most annoying. We didn't check the party divide on that one.
More Democrat than Republican, also younger. I think more younger people than
But
older people.
But I think the fact that it was in second place to whatever, because I think what is most annoying about whatever is that you can use it in so many different situations, and depending upon your intonation, it can also mean a lot of different things, as fake news can. So fake news can certainly be very dismissive, fake news, or it can also be, you're kidding me. That's fake news.
Yes.
So who knows? We will certainly see if fake news continues to challenge whatever in 2018, but perhaps we'll have some new words as well.
So this is the last episode of Poll Hub for the year. We started in the middle of the year. Episode, 23? I lost count. 23 episodes, and we do hope that you have enjoyed listening and listening to us as we look into polling in a hopefully a different way. But it would not be a complete year of Poll Hubs if we didn't talk about New Year's resolutions. And that's another poll that we ask. We go out and find out what most popular resolutions are. Any difference this year than in past years?
Not much.
We all pretty much want to improve ourselves. I mean, I think one of the interesting thing is we do see that about 44% of Americans say that they are going to resolve to do something, and I kind of wonder if it's almost the phrase that has changed over time. We still ask what you resolve to do, but I think of it as a reset. For the new year, and a lot of people are going to reset by trying to be a better person. Losing weight, exercising more, eating healthier. You're getting the kind of theme here.
Yeah, this is the Lee Marengoff biography here.
Because you're doing all these things
No.
next year.
Yeah.
But this is every year.
You and my doctor wish.
These are every year. These are the top ones, right?
Yep, top 3. Same top 3 as last year.
Although something that we did see that came up a little bit higher this year was, getting a better job, and that's really driven, not surprisingly, by millennials and younger folks who that is really their number one resolution.
So is that because there's more of them in the economy every year? This is a very large generation. It's the first really big generation since the boomers, and they have now moved in almost. I think all of them are now in the job market. Is that a reflection of that? Is it just the size of the generation?
I think it's size of the generation, and I think it's also the difficulty that this generation has had in terms of finding employment in fields that they're interested in.
It's interesting. We talked about the economy at the top of this show and how the condition of the economy, or what people think of the economy, is now kind of disassociated from the popularity of the president. And now we're talking about it again in a different way. It strikes me that this notion that the economy is great, the numbers can back that up. Some numbers can back that up. But this is an indication with resolutions, and something as innocuous as your resolutions, that there's a sense that things are not all well in the economy when you've got 9% saying, my main resolution is I want a better job.
Yeah, and
There's anxiety out there, though.
Almost double. That's almost double from what we've seen in the past.
But I think there's anxiety in terms of there is economic anxiety about the future and what's going on, and there's anxiety about healthcare because things seem to be changing. And at least we're hearing about change, and not sure what it's going to all mean during the coming year. So I'm not surprised about that.
We and most Americans are going to focus on what what we can control
right.
and what is in our control, and
Well,
that's
the narrower,
self-improvement.
the narrower your resolution, the more likely you are to accomplish
So
something.
that's what I saw in here that 2/3 of people say they actually
Part
kept
of,
them.
or part. Or
Part of
Yeah, and that's kind of a wiggle room. I mean, I
Well,
kept
or
part of
part
it.
of the year.
I ate 3 carrot sticks. That means I ate healthier. I mean,
Well, gyms are
2/3
very
keep-
Gyms are very popular in
January.
January.
Yeah, that's when they
So-
do all their business. Yeah.
They
So
sign you up for the
So,
year.
so in that sense, it does focus people, and I think we are all, very interested in changing at least some aspect of our lives.
That we can control.
So here's my
Things
resolution.
we can control.
And
as
then I'm going
opposed
to ask
Okay.
you yours.
Yeah,
All right.
okay,
So
good.
my resolution is that I am going to not leap as quickly to conclusions about other people, like on Twitter and in social media, based on what they say in their tweets and their social media and what they post. I'm
Good luck
trying to
with
be
that.
less partisan, not partisan in a Democratic Republican way, but less reactionary to seeing what people post.
So could
That's what I'm
I
gonna try and do.
translate that into being
Into
a better
English?
person?
Sure.
So does that mean you'll be a better social media person?
Yeah, but being a better person is so easy. I can say, I
For
gave
you,
5
maybe.
more. No, I gave $5 more to charity. I'm a better person. No, this is very specific.
no, Pepper-
I think social
media's gotten
right.
awful
Social media. We spend a
raunchy.
lot of time on it,
Yes.
and we interact with people, and I interact with a lot of people on Twitter in particular. And I'm not always proud of the way I interact with them based on my initial snap judgment and how easy it is to be snarky and all that. And I'm slowing down. I'm going to slow it down, and I'm going to consider, what they're saying and where they're coming from before instantly going into snark mode. So what do you got? What are yours?
Okay, well, I don't feel that being a better person applies directly to me. I can see where you thought that, but I definitely hit the others. Weight loss, you haven't surveyed that, but weight loss, exercise more, eating healthier, there you go. Getting a better job, I'm thrilled with what I'm doing. So
Well,
I
that's
can't,
good.
I can't go that
We
way.
don't want to lose you.
No. If I
Well-
don't take off weight, exercise more, and eat healthier, well, anyway,
Well,
we
yeah.
won't go there.
Let's not get morbid in the last episode of the
we're not
year.
gonna go there.
We love to eat here at the Marist Pole,
Oh.
and we are constantly bringing in what we call goodies, anything from home baked treats to other kinds of bagels, and
Always
carbs from our favorite delis and bakeries. So I don't think that I will be terribly successful for the entire year of 2018, but I will start with trying to think of eating healthier and trying to avoid those late night pizzas and some of the early morning bagels. But I'm not starting until
But we would
January
all-
1st.
But at Poll Hub, we would all resolve, I think, to provide enlightening and insightful information about polls during the coming year. How's that?
That is a perfect way to end the year. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year. So that'll do it for this edition of Poll Hub, a production of the Marist Poll at Marist College with our executive producer, Mary Griffith, and we ask you to send in your questions to pollhub@marist.edu.
And we are everywhere you are on social media at Marist Poll. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter. So join us, follow us, and we will be there where you are.
And please subscribe. One more request. We would also like you to rate us. I think you have up to 5 stars to do that.
Also as few as 1.
Well, we have
don't
to.
have
We
to
have
tell
to be
them
fair.
that.
We have to be fair. But if you take a listen and you do like what you're hearing, please give us a review.
And Happy New Year.
So that will do it for this edition of one more time. Thank you. Oh, there I am.
And send your questions to... Oh, wait a second. Okay, start it.
I was doing subscribe, okay?
Yeah, you got the easy button. I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, here we go.